Welcome to Pico Gaiden! Hello and welcome to the Pixel Gaiden podcast YouTube channel, your number one place for retro games and retro-inspired video games. My name is Cody, and this is my first attempt at a YouTube video, so thank you for being my pawns. If you don't recognize me, like I said, it's because it's my first time doing this on video. However, we've been doing the podcast now for almost, I think we're at 60 episodes now, and I wanted to start doing some of this with some visuals. We've gotten a lot of requests for things like that, and I want to go ahead and start presenting that. So I went ahead and decided to do a segment I've done in the past called the first $100, where I say, hey, if you've got a brand new, let's say Nintendo, what do you want to do with your first $100 worth of video games? However, in this case, it's a little different. I'm going to riff on that a little bit because we're going to be talking about the Pico8 fantasy console. If you guys have heard about the Pico8 console, but it's been a while, absolutely check it out. A lot of new things have been going on there, really cool stuff. And if you haven't, well, really quick, it's basically a software package that was created by Lexalife, and you can buy it for $15 if you want to try to actually work through code and do some software development, anywhere from beginning to hardcore coders are in there playing with it. But as a video gamer on a video game podcast, I love it because there's a ton of really cool, creative, and fun games, like legitimately good, fun games. A lot of copycats, a lot of, demakes, ports, if you will, but also a lot of really cool new stuff. So it's a software package that has a very select set of limitations that create a lot of creativity on the part of the programmer. Nonetheless, all the games are free. That's important to know. So we can't spend $100, but let's just say if you're getting started, how about 10 good games to start playing with your Pico8 fantasy console. So let's get right into it. What you might notice is I like to play my Pico8 games on what I like to call a standalone device. Really, it's just a Raspberry Pi 400 computer, which is this beautiful little wedge-based white keyboard computer here in front of me. And I solely use this for Pico8 games when I'm not using it with a different memory card in it, which is the card I use for my RetroPie emulation-based systems. So nonetheless, when you load this bad boy up, you get a nice little intro screen here. It's like a little DOS prompt looking thing, and typically you're going to want to type in Splore, that's S-P-L-O-R-E, which allows you to explore the Pico8 library. Now this has to be connected completely to the internet at all times in order to explore, if you will. However, if you do want to download images for these games, you can do that and physically put them on the card. It's interesting because they do show up as a image file, but they are indeed a full game. Now, let's go ahead and dig into the games. There's a little of everything on this console, or fantasy console, I should say. So let's go ahead and start with kind of one of the easier genres, one that I love very much, and that is shmups. A couple ones I want to note here. First, let's go ahead and start off with a newer one here called Hybris. Now, this Hybris game is very cool. It essentially is 4 levels here. You could go ahead and pick which of these awesome looking levels, which are like the interior of a human body. It's kind of like that movie Fantastic Voyage from the old days, or Inner Space from the 80s, right? And you hop in and you're basically fighting off these, I don't know, viruses or something within different muscle tissues or lung tissue or whatever. Very cool little game. You can see it's kind of unique here, kind of a single screen shooter. But I love that there's multiple levels to choose from and blast your way through. I would also suggest a game called Green Legion. This is a game that's been out for quite a few years now, and it is a game that starts out simple enough, and you level up, and when you level up, you get more bullets, and more enemies come at you, and you can just keep on playing and playing. It's really cool because you can get to level 66 or whatever I've gotten to at this point, and you're still working your way up. When you quit the game and come back in later at another time, The game knows, I guess, by reading your IP address, what computer you're playing it on, and it knows where you left off, and it will restart you right there. Very cool use of that. Next up on the list, and the final shmup I'm going to mention tonight, will be a game called Solar Blaster Challenge Stage. Now, this game is not like a super impressive feat of programming or anything like that. It is just a very fun, solid, single screen shooter, kind of like a, like a Galaga or something like that. But what makes it super interesting is that the gameplay is super fast. As soon as you clear a screen, a new wave of enemies comes in, and it's kind of random, so you never know exactly what's coming next. There's also power-ups that fall. You can shoot the power-up to change which weapon you'll get, if it's a bomb or like a triple shot or a machine gun or something like that. And it just keeps the action fun and fresh, and you get a time limit at the top. So you're trying to work through this as quick as possible, more so than just dodging and staying alive. You're trying to maximize your score. Very fun, very simple, highly recommend. Now let's move on to another style of video game, another staple, if you will, and that is the RPG. Yes, the Pico8 can RPG, bro. This game is called A Dream's Command. I found out about it pretty recently here, and started playing through it. And again, nothing groundbreaking, but it is a cool little, pocket-sized RPG. You start over here in these docks. There's a few NPCs you can talk to, and you're on your way to, starting to do some grinding and leveling up. What's really cool about this particular RPG is when you can see the overworld map here, you have random encounters. And depending on what level you're at, the encounters will get more and more difficult, but you'll also gain more and more attacks or spells. And the way that they work is very cool and intriguing. It's not just, press A over and over and over again and you attack and they get hit and then they attack you. There's actually, depending on what weapon you use, a certain number of bars, and in the middle of these little lines that scroll from left to right, you try to take the marker and match it right to the center by hitting it at the right time. And it's very slow for the easy weapons that do less damage. It's very fast for later weapons. And then there's also more bars, so you have to try to match the sweet spot, if you will, on multiple bars. And if you can get all of them, it says epic, and you get a big old attack on the enemy. If you only get a couple of them, you get some damage. If you miss on the first try, you don't do any damage, and the enemy hurts you. Pretty cool, pretty fun. Simple little RPG for the Pico8. The next game I'm here to talk about is not an RPG, but more of an action puzzle adventure game. It is called Dank Tomb, and this is probably, to me, one of the most impressive, most interesting games, original game here on the Pico8 that I've seen. It's actually fairly early on as well, and as you can see here in the video, if you're watching the video, it's a very dark screen, a very dank tomb, if you will, and you're this little Indiana Jones type adventurer. You can go through these screens with your lantern out, which allows you to see, like a sphere of light around you. There are caverns or spaces in the floor you can jump over. There are walls and doors to, kind of make a sort of a maze, if you will. You find objects, you have to put those objects into different holes. To move different platforms around. It's a top-down adventure puzzle game, but it's not a frustrating, impossible puzzle game. It is just a game that you have to kind of figure out the simple puzzles to move on. I have actually not completed this. I spent a lot of time playing it. Every time I play, I end up playing on a new device, and so I start from the beginning again, but I always have a blast with it. You can see here there's spikes on the floor to avoid. Super cool game. I highly recommend Dank Tomb. Probably one of my top 3 favorite games on the Pico8 platform. Now I want to move on to what I think the Pico8 does absolutely the best, and that is puzzle games. Now Eric and I on the show Pixel Gaiden here often talk about how we hate puzzle games of a certain genre, but we both like action puzzle games, like falling block puzzle games or I like match 3 puzzle games. And there's a couple of great Pico8 games that people have created that, to my knowledge, are completely original and they're not ports of other games. The first one I want to talk about here is My Chan's Sweet Buns. Now, this game has kind of a silly title here, and you can see it's kind of cutesy. It's kind of a Japanese anime look. This is a brilliant game I put actually many hours into, and I have completed. Very cool game where you have a bunch of food items in a grid, and as you clear items, they go off the screen and more items fall from the top. You can see above the screen a hint of what the next item is to come for each column, so you can keep that in mind while you're playing. But essentially what you're doing is you have a deck of cards, and they are random, and they will list a food item. For example, it might be a cinnamon bun, and it will list a number, 2, 3, 1, and by clicking on a row or column of that food in that amount, 2, 3, 1, whatever, it'll clear that off the board and then complete your card. Your goal is to go through your entire deck of cards, so you're trying to get rid of the high numbers, your 3s, maybe a 2. The 1s are really there because they're easy. They're there to kind of strategically help you get rid of things. But above and beyond that, if you get a row of 4 on your board, it clears automatically and you gain a star. And these stars allow you to have superpowers, which might help you to rearrange foods on the map, or take one of your cards and change it from a 3 down to a 1. Things like that might help you. When you complete a level, however, if you have any stars left, they add to your overall score. That score turns into currency, and in between actual matches, you can go to the store and buy a number of things, including new food items. And the ultimate goal of the whole game is to collect all the food items so that you've unlocked everything and you kind of win the game. Very cool. The power-ups changed based on which food items you use or you pick for your game. You can start with the original 4, or else you can start adding new foods as you go, but it will always be a total of 4 different food items. Very cool game. Hard to fit into a small segment like this, but highly, highly recommended. This might be my number 1 game on the Pico8. So what is another fun strategy puzzle type game original to the Pico8? There's a number of them, but Eric and I both really enjoyed this one, and it's called High Stakes. And it's kind of a card. It's shown as a card game, but really what it is, you've got a layout here with a number of cards up to 9, and then there's one card mixed in there that is the vampire. It's a fun little story where you are basically dead. A vampire has drained you of all your blood, but he decides to be a sporting chap and give you 20 milliliters of your blood back in a shot glass, and you can play him in some games of cards to try to win all your blood back, which you must do exponentially. So you try to locate which card is the vampire and click on all the other cards on this map here before clicking on the vampire. If you click the vampire, you lose that hand, and therefore however many milliliters of blood you currently have bit. If you can identify where the vampire is, you can stake him immediately, which gives you a whole bunch of blood back, or you can simply unlock all the cards around him without him, which gives you a good amount of blood back. Completing a row or a column will give you a little hint, such as one of these here, where you can place this on a card that you've already flipped over, and it will tell you the cards completely adjacent to it, whether they are higher or lower than your card. It takes a lot to get used to, but once you got it, it clicks, and it's a whole lot of fun. Pro tip, took me a while to learn this, but there's also a way to cut your losses and finish the hand where you're at. So if you're not sure where to go next or not confident, you can go ahead and keep the blood you have for that particular hand and move forward by folding, essentially. Now, here on Pixel Gaiden, I've talked time and time again about how I'm not a huge fan of ports. I don't need to see more ports happen. But for whatever reason in my mind, there's a big difference between a port and a demake. And naturally, if anybody, quote unquote, ports a game to the Pico8, it's going to be a demake. And so I love these demakes on the Pico8. I've got 3 here to round out my 10 games you must try when you first try the Pico8. And they are all demakes, or if you want to call them, ports. The first one I want to bring up here is Pico Pill. Of course, this is the haunting reality that all the games have the word Pico in it. Kind of a pet peeve of mine, but Pico Pill is a Dr. Mario demake. And to be honest, it actually plays exactly like Dr. Mario. Very similar, and it probably even looks very much like the Game Boy version, except it doesn't mention any Mario characters. Not quite as cute as Dr. Mario. But the gameplay is all here, and if you've ever played Dr. Mario, it is a great game. It's here in spades. You try to get rid of all the viruses inside of this bottle, even though in here it doesn't look as much like a bottle. And matching 4 colors in a row will get rid of the virus, but it's really fun to figure out, hey, if you have 2 sides of this pill, how can you make it so that connecting 4 will drop other pills onto other viruses, which can chain to other viruses, and you can get very creative and uniquely strategic with this game. Highly recommended. Play some Pico Pill. This is one I just found out about, and man, they did a great job on this. There's a few downsides, but what we're playing here is Pico Off-Road, which is super off-road, again with the name Pico shoved in the front. They shoved like all of off-road into this cool little demake. The one major point of contention would be that there is no hit detection, so you're really kind of just racing against ghosts of the other car, if you will. But if you are looking at this on video, you can see that this is off-road. The screen does follow your car around. You don't see the entire map at once like you would on off-road, just because the resolution of the Pixel 8 fantasy console isn't high enough to show all that. But and the physics are a little bit different, but you're playing, top-down RC racing cars in the dirt. You get nitro boosts. You have jumps and barriers. You have lakes of water that slow you down, and it's a great game of off-road. You can play a tournament where you have multiple races, and you try to come in first, second, third, as hard as you can get up the rankings. Great little pocket version of off-road on the Pico 8. So this brings me to my last game, which is another demake. And again, amazing how much game you can fit with these limitations. This game I just found out about, and I have been playing this a lot. And what we have here is a game called Pico Zombie Garden. If you're listening to the podcast, not watching the video, you might wonder, what is that? Well, it is Plants vs. Zombies is what it is. Obviously a very popular computer-based, web-based game, mobile game, if you will. If you have not played that game, absolutely play it. But the truth is, this version here has the majority of the gameplay built in. Zombies are slowly making their way from the right to the left of the screen. You have little drops of sun that are falling from the top, which you collect as currency, and you can use that to plant things in your garden. You can plant flowers, which will make more sun for you. You can plant weapons, such as the pea shooter here, that will shoot the zombies as they come. Eventually, you unlock other things like double pea shooters or I always call them potatoes, but I guess they're walnuts that the zombies have to bite their way through, which takes time, so they sit there kind of stalled out while your pea shooters are shooting them. And it's a fun little strategy game where you're trying to defend your garden versus these zombies. If you haven't played it, you must play it. If you've played a ton of Plants vs. Zombies and wish there was more, this is worth a shot. I mean, it's Plants vs. Zombies, but it's so fun and quirky because they were able to make it work on this little fantasy console here. So that is it for Cody's Corner this month. Thank you for my little experiment here, trying to do some video. I hope it goes well. I hope to do more of these in the future. If you guys have any Pico 8 games that you love, I think we need to find a way to start curating, if you will, a list of these great games. The problem with the Pico 8 setup is that the new stuff is always in the front. Not necessarily all the good stuff, but the new stuff is in the front. So there's years and years now of games that are kind of hidden below the surface, and I want some sort of record of what they all are, because there's just so much in here. It's hard to sift through all the stuff. It's fun to sift through the stuff, and I recommend it. But if you really want to find a good game that you can sink your teeth into, they're here, but you have to dig. And I would love to find a way to curate those. So place down below in the comments, if you're watching this on YouTube, let me know what games on the Pico 8 are worth playing, or you can always contact us at the Pixel Gaiden podcast information, also shown below or in the show notes here on the podcast. All right, guys, there you go. Cody's Corner audio ripped straight from the episode 59 of Pixel Gaiden Retro Video Game Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, I'm going to try to keep doing more and more of these things, and I know the rest of the guys, Eric and Tim on the channel, are going to do the same. We're part of a greater network of channels called the Amigos Retro Gaming Network, so please check out all the shows they have, including the Amigos, ARG Presents, Sprite Castle, so many other great shows on there. And of course, you can reach us for feedback. We're on Twitter, the Twitters now. You can reach us at pixel_Gaiden, and we'd love to hear your feedback. And of course, do all the stuff we love to do on YouTube, right? Subscribe below, ring bells, whatever you do. We want to see more and more listeners on here so we can keep creating this content and having a great time and having some interaction. So check us out. I'll put the information on the screen now, and I'll catch you next time.